Hi guys and Happy New Year! I hope you had a safe transition into the year 2021. I'm trying to think of the new year kind of like as its own new year and not like a bad overtime of year 2020, but here's just to hoping for that. But I've decided to try and come off as strong as possible into the new year. So this year we're going to focus a bit more on tutorials. In 2021 I want to do a little less experimenting and try and focus more on the content I know that I'm good at making, and that would be tutorials. So put on your working glasses, listen to your teacher, that would be me. And let's get started with this year's first video, a tutorial on cartoony versus semi-realistic shading, where I'll also share my shading and rendering techniques with you guys. It's going to be a bit similar to my color without line art tutorial, except in this video we'll focus on shading styles and rendering techniques of the same cartoony character. And the character in question is Damon, the assistant of Mocha that I have introduced to you a few videos back. I actually just launched a page on my website dedicated to these two's universe. There's going to be a lot of storytelling there, comics and a few animations, etc. So if you want to check out the page, the link is in the description. And a very short reminder that my store is running a relaunch campaign until the 15th with a store-wide 15% with a store-wide 15% discount and flat shipping rates. A huge thanks to all of you who bought something already. I'm super thankful and grateful for your love and support. So, this is going to be fun because we're applying two different shading techniques to the same base drawing. So let's start off with the cartoony shading because it's the simplest one. Now, obviously there are many ways to shade cartoony characters, okay? My way is not the definite way or the only way, it's just one way to do it. In my recent animated short comic, Demons Can Be Such Pranksters, 95% of the comic was colored in flats without any shading. If you look at animated shows, that is the style you'll often find, like just flat colors, because for animations, simple is good. Look at a show like Gravity Falls. Yes, I'm going to bring this one up again because I love that show and I just rewatched it, okay? The backgrounds are way more detailed and painted than the characters, who are very simply shaded and with only few shadows and highlight indicated. That also means that when there is a lot of shading or lighting effects in a scene all of a sudden, it is way more impactful and dramatic. That was just a tiny hint on how to create contrast in cartoony styles. I used the same for my short comic, so like in the panels that meant something more or had a bit bigger impact, I added shading. So for Damon's cartoony and, well, you might say canon shading, we're keeping it really simple. I start off with some clean line art. I'm just using the G pen in Clip Studio Paint with some stabilization on it. I create a layer for each flat color or base color, call it what you wish, and using the paint bucket tool to color him in. That's a really fast and efficient way to color in Clip Studio Paint, if you have somewhat clean line art. Next step is something I personally enjoy doing when I draw and color in my cartoony style, and that is coloring either all or just bits of the line art. Here we are painting the line art of the hair, the skin, the teeth, as well as the eye. I do realize, by the way, I missed some parts that are black, but I'll correct it later, so no worries. In my short comic, I only color the line art of the hair to keep the coloring simpler. I just really liked the black line art contrasting against the light purple line color on his hair. The reason I'm coloring bits and pieces of the line art is because, well, in this example we don't have any shading, not yet at least, and the colors of the line art just give that extra little push to bring some more life into the drawing, despite only being colored in flats. So we could either call it a day now for the cartoony style, or we could move on. For the sake of this tutorial, let's just move on and add a bit of a simple shading like in the reference image on the left. And I gotta say, it's very basic, okay? For this technique, start off with a big, soft airbrush in your shadow color. I'm, by the way, shading on a new layer, clipping down to the skin's base layer. We're doing skin now. loosely paint in some shadow areas to create some variations in the skin. Then switch to your preferred hard brush. Again, I'm just using the G pen and paint in some harder shadows. I focus the harder shadows under the nose, the chin area, especially under the chin, inside the ear, as well as just under the hair. I'm just using the same shadow color as before, but feel free to either make it even darker than the first one or choose a completely different one. I then do the exact same thing for the clothes. Now, I do not shade his hair, because it's part of my cartoony style to leave the hair as simple as possible. And no, it has nothing to do with the fact that when I start shading hair, I can't control it and I can't stop myself. Actually, it has everything to do with that. So, that's also why coloring the line out of the hair can help shaping the character, since I leave all of the shading out. And that is how simple my cartoon shading is. And like I said, sometimes I just color in the flats and use black line art too. If you only use black line art, by the way, you can try to add a thicker black outline around your entire character silhouette for an extra cartoony look. Now I'll duplicate the folder with the cartoony shading style and use it as a base for my semi-realistic style. All the previous steps are the same I would go through if I had All the previous steps are the same I would go through if I had the intention of shading semi-realistically from the beginning. Now, the main difference here is that we will not be depending on the line art anymore. Instead, we'll try to erase as much of it as possible and kinda recreate it, but with shapes. So in order to shade in shapes, that sounds funny, we need to know where the shapes are and what they are shaped like. For faces especially, I recommend looking up Azaro's Planes of the Head references. Or just use this wonderful free tool by William Nguyen, which is inspired by the same concept. Our face consists of certain planes that has certain shapes, like in the reference that you see right here. The idea is that you can easier predict where light and shadow falls by dividing the face into planes. If the planes face a light source, they are lighter, and if they face away from a light source, they lie in shadow. We'll probably go in depth with this in another video. I just wanted to show you so you know what references I use when I shade a face, because shading is all about shadows and lights, so we create a form on the face by taking light and shadow into account. Because we are painting a semi-realistic shading on a cartoony character, it can very easily start looking really weird if we ignore the face construction. And these planes are pretty easy to just transfer to your drawing to create an illusion of 3D, which is exactly what we are going for. So let's get to it. First of all, I paint over the line art of the hair since it's very unnatural that it's light purple. We can agree on that at least, right? We'll work on the hair in a bit though. I start out working on the same shading layer, clipping to the skin base layer like before. Here I mainly use the watercolor brushes in Clip Studio Paint, an airbrush, and occasionally the dark pencil brush for details. The watercolor brushes blend together as you draw and they have transfer on them. The transfer is the most important detail here. It doesn't matter if it blends or not. The transfer is just really nice and helps you to create variation in your strokes. You can always blend manually or use smudge depending on what you're comfortable with. Then I use shadow and highlight colors to roughen out those face planes. I might alter them a bit so it looks better on the cartoony character, but as a rough reference, I try to recreate the planes from my reference. Remember that some planes lie in shadow and others in light, and there are also some tones in between light and shadow. I usually work with a flat color, 2 highlight colors, and then 2 shadow colors. That gives me a great variety of tones to work with. And just because I have 2 highlight colors doesn't mean I have 2 light sources. It's just 2 different variations of a highlight color. Second light source, let's forget about that for now. Let's talk about that in another video. We're just using 1 light source for this picture. So let's talk a bit about shading and rendering techniques that I use. When I shade and render semi-realistically, I mainly use 3 brush techniques. 1. I paint hard and hard and use a soft blender to blend them together, trying to have a mix of soft and hard edges. Number 2, I use a lasso tool to mark out an area and then use a soft airbrush to lightly paint in a transition. If you then reverse the selection, you can do the opposite on the other side of the selection to create a hard line with soft shading around it. And third and lastly, I start out with soft shading and come in with a hard brush to paint the lines manually. These are the 3 main rendering and shading techniques that I use. So how do you know where to put the soft transitions and hard edges? Think of it like where you would put line art or plane separations, you need a harder edge, and on bigger planes and areas, you want to do a more soft transition. Now I'm moving a bit over to the hair. We'll return to the skin later. I'm working almost from the same principle, a base color, 2 highlight colors, and just 1 shadow color this time, which is the same color as the line art of the hair. I start out drawing a lot of random lines indicating the direction of the hair. This step is not pretty and it doesn't have to be. Then I find the area where the hair parts and make sure all hair in that area originates from there. For this I'm using the dense watercolor brush and the darkest highlight color. Then I lightly paint in some more light with a big soft airbrush, just to get some more color variation in the hair. After that I pick up the shadow color and start defining the parting and create variation. For this step I use the darker pencil brush because it allows me to create more detailed strokes than the watercolor brushes. I follow the direction of the hair while I paint in the shadows. Then I pick my second and brightest highlight color and start adding that to the hair to give some shine and further variation. Besides that, I also start adding small single hair strands to the edges of the hair silhouette, so it seems more like the hair consists of individual hair strands and not just a big blob of something that makes up the hair. The little highlight hair strands are the game changer here, if you ask me, in terms of making it look like a lot of hair. Then I move back down and continue on the face. Don't ask why I move back and forth like this. I think I got excited about the hair for a moment. I'm not sure. Maybe I just knew that I was going to spend an hour on the face alone and I wanted to take a break. I don't know. Don't. Just don't. Anyway, then I move back down and continue on the face. However, now I'm working on my top layer called the render, which allows me to paint over everything below. It's the same layer I used when I painted the hair just now. In the beginning, I used the lasso tool a lot to separate the planes and apply soft transitions away from the harder edges. I also changed the nose because the shape looks weird in a semi-realistic shading. To emphasize the realism in your shading, you can add details such as the edge under the eye and the eye bags. It adds to the 3-dimensional illusion. When you shade the eyes, remember to round your shading off. Just follow the round shape of the eye. I'm also adding small intense shadows just under the upper and lower eyelids, going down onto the eye. This is because of a thing called ambient occlusion, a topic we'll probably also look at some other time. But the simple principle is to add very dark shadows in places where no light gets, for instance in the nostrils as well. Moving on to the finishing touches on the skin. I keep emphasizing the planes I already shaped out and add or remove transitions and edges until I'm satisfied. This sometimes requires a big back and forth, especially when you are like me and you're not really nailing it the first time. Because that's just the thing that I'm struggling a bit with. That's nailing things in the first time. So I'll go a bit back and forth with this step. I always find rendering teeth really hard, so bear with me here. Since his teeth are so big, they're going to look insane once they're rendered semi-realistically. I start by lassoing the upper section of the teeth, removing the line art. Then if I invert the selection, I have the bottom part of the teeth that I can work on. Then I'm just switching between the 2 selections while I shade the upper and the bottom set of the teeth. And the focus here is the roundness of the teeth. Since they are sharp like this, I imagine them they're rounded, so I try to emphasize that by putting the shadows mostly in the corners of the teeth. I used the same principles on the clothes then. I made a selection for the shirt and the vest respectively and used a hard brush to create more variation in the shades. I tried thinking of the shapes of the clothes as well to make it look more tangible and 3D. Finally, I noticed I didn't use enough contrast in the semi-realistic portrait, so I merged a duplicate folder of my portrait into one single layer. Then I used tonal correction a few times to increase the contrast and alter the colors a bit. Tonal correction or just adjustment layers lets you adjust the contrast, brightness and colors and more on one entire layer at the same time. And lastly, I made a selection just of the teeth and up the contrast there too. And I realize now how freaky non-human my character looks in a more realistic version. He looks so unnaturally skinny and tired. It's really freaky. Now I kinda don't wish to meet him anymore. I don't wanna look at him. If you're interested in the whole uncut process at just 150% speed, that's almost real time, you can access it now on my Patreon. My Patreon is $5 a month. All rewards are given directly in the feed and are accessible for as long as you are a patron. There's a charge of the pledge up front since you get immediate access to all the content in a few seconds. You don't have to wait for a term to be released. From then on, Patreon charges once every month on the 1st. I think right now I upload approximately 2 to 3 videos a month. Then I also upload step by step and previews and behind the scenes. And well, basically it's like my VIP platform or something. The link is in the description too if you want to check it out. So guys, thank you so much for watching my video of Damon becoming a freak of nature, so to speak. I really appreciate it. Hit the like button if you want to support my work because it really helps a lot. Leave a comment for super ultimate support. And share for, oh my god, what will that be? Super ultra mega cool ring-a-ling ding dong support. I don't know. Oh, this is the first video of the year. I kind of already set a baseline for the standard, didn't I? Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye bye.